share with us whatever that she has to share with us. So I'd like to start the session now, if everyone agrees. Yeah.
Okay, I think.
All right, great. Yeah, thank you. Okay, a very good morning to everyone who has joined this session. I am Jacqueline Chuah. I'm the moderator for this session, and I'd just like to give a short introduction to what the session is about. Okay, the webinar today is the Effective Academic Conference Presentation, some guidelines given by Dr. Ishamina Athirah Muntassir Gardiner of Language Center, Universiti Brunei Darussalam. This webinar is an initiative that has been held by i-InteLeC 2021 by UiTM Kedah in collaboration with Language Center, Universiti Brunei Darussalam, and also with ILD UiTM Kedah. And I am delighted to be given the opportunity to moderate this session. And before this, I would like to also introduce you to our esteemed speaker, Dr. Ishamina Athirah, fondly known as Dr. Ish. Is that okay if we call you Dr. Ish?
Yes, that's fine.
Yes. Dr. Ish is a lecturer at the Language Center of Universiti Brunei Darussalam, and her specialization is in the area of applied linguistics. And she is currently teaching a few courses related to linguistics and also proficiency skills. And she has got a list of very impressive publications, including papers published in international refereed journals, and also she has achieved the Scopus Index of 4 citations. So that's very impressive. Congratulations, Dr. Ish. So we're eager to share with you, to listen from you and to learn from you. So a little bit a background summary of the webinar. In this webinar, Dr. Ish will share with us some guidelines about how to prepare and deliver a paper presentation for an academic conference effectively. So that would be useful in your upcoming presentations if you plan to present at the conference section of i-InteLeC, which is happening very soon. And she will also consider some alternatives and different modes of presentation relevant to the current situation, such as virtual and video presentations, which is really, really important and relevant to the current situation of pandemic when everyone is learning from home. So, we will listen from Dr. Ish very soon. But before this, just a few housekeeping rules. Throughout the presentation, everyone has to mute their microphone unless you have something to ask in between. But I think you would need to press the palm button to show that you have something to ask. If the speaker allows that, then you can actually unmute yourself and speak. Otherwise, you can also type your questions on the chat box. And towards the end of the session, we will allow about 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A session, in which you can freely ask your questions. All right. And the attendance link will be shared 10 minutes before the end of the session. So stay put and just record your attendance for some documentation purposes, whatever. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Ishamina Athirah of Universiti Brunei Darussalam to share with us the tips on how to do presentation in academic conference. Welcome, Dr. Isha. Dr. Ish.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jacqueline. I think I would like to share my screen now. Do I click present now? Okay, share my screen. Okay. Okay, so before I begin, can I just ask if everyone can see my screen?
Yes, we can. I mean,
okay,
I can see that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Jacqueline, for the introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining me. And thank you to UiTM Kedah for inviting me to give a talk. This morning, I will be talking about just, giving some tips, some guidelines for how to give an academic conference presentation effectively. So this is just based on my experience and also some pointers that I've picked up from some other academics with maybe with more seasoned experience in giving conference presentations. So first of all, I'd just like to just very briefly define what an academic conference presentation is, and then I'll move on to give some guidelines for presenting effectively. So I think it's probably safe to say that everyone in attendance for my talk today are academics, at least academics or in the academic field or in higher education, or perhaps even students in higher education. So perhaps at some point in your academic career or life, you have given a conference presentation or even just an academic presentation. So that's not very okay. So a conference. Conferences are a key place to disseminate research findings. So it is basically sort of like quite a big event, if you may, and it's actually quite exciting if you're an academic to attend a conference, much so present at a conference and to present your research study to other academics or experts in the field. So in attendance is usually a group of people with sort of a similar interest in a particular discipline, topic, or field of inquiry, because academic conferences are usually based on discipline. Yeah, so you have conferences on language teaching, conferences on medicine, and so on. So presenting at a conference has many benefits for academics, especially maybe postgraduate students or early career academics. It gives you the opportunity to communicate your research to a larger audience. Okay, usually to people within the same discipline or field. And you also have the opportunity to get some feedback for your work from experts or academics or even just peers. And this can help improve your work, especially if you're working on publishing your study. Conferences are also great. A great opportunity to expand your academic network. So you meet people, you meet other people locally, internationally, people with the same within the same discipline. Perhaps you can meet some other researchers that you have cited, that you have read. Okay. And this can also give you many opportunities for potential future collaborations, which is always very exciting. Presenting at a conference can also improve your CV. So you can list down how many presentations you've given at a conference. This can also lead to publications in conference proceedings, and even publications in journal articles, okay, even more, much more prestigious. So the purpose of a conference presentation for the presenter, okay, it is not to impress the audience, okay. You don't have to tell them every single thing that you know about a particular subject or topic. You don't have to present every little detail of your work, okay. But when you're presenting at a conference, you're presenting your work. So you're giving the audience a sense of what your work is about, okay? Just an idea about your work. You need to get them interested in your work, okay? And you also should make them want to read your paper or find out more about your work, and also get feedback on your work, okay? So presenting at a conference is basically presenting your work. It could be usually it's usually a work in progress, or it could be something that's finished and you want to get some feedback. You could probably get some ideas and maybe some advice on how to improve your work. Okay, if some areas need improving, some areas need more clarification, and so on. Usually the main goal of the end goal of a conference presentation is to publish your paper, okay, to publish your work in a paper. So even, you know, and in a proceedings is adequate, but if you want to aim higher, then you would want to publish a paper in a more prestigious journal. Okay, so one of the things that you need to consider, okay, even in the planning stages of your presentation, is your audience, okay? Who will you be presenting to? Who will be there? Now, usually with conferences, they're quite discipline specific, okay? So usually you have academics that are experts in your field. Sometimes you can have academics that are not experts in your field. Most likely you have students, okay, other students and peers. Sometimes you may have non-academics, probably people sitting somewhere at the back. But, you know, who knows? You will most likely have a mix of different types of people. So you also need to think about your audience, okay? If you're presenting something that's a bit more specific, try and make it a little bit more general, because you may have students or other academics who are not experts in that field. So if you're using special terms, special, maybe a special, a register for that particular discipline or field, you would think about at least providing a brief explanation or definition about them. Okay, so another thing you should consider is keep in mind that your audience may be tired. I mean, if you're not the first presenter, okay, if they've sat through the keynote speech, if they've sat through other presentations, if they've just had lunch, if you're presenting in the afternoon, they might be tired, okay? And if they're attending your presentation, they might think, why should I listen to this presenter? Why is this presenter interesting? Okay, so based on other suggestions, this is just a tendency, okay? Some non-experts will tend to tune off within 2 minutes, experts within 5 minutes, okay? So what can you do? Now, your goal, one of your aims is to make your presentation interesting, okay? Make your audience want to listen to you, okay? So in that case, you need to maintain their attention. You need to maintain their interest in your talk. So try and give an early motivation at the beginning of your talk. You have to draw your audience in, okay? Give them a reason to want to listen to you. First impressions, always very important, okay? At the beginning of your talk, if you don't seem interested, if you're not dynamic, if you don't if you're not positive, if you don't give off an exciting vibe, people will just tune off from the beginning, and they will most likely not listen to you throughout your talk. Okay. You may also spoil the punchline, as in from earlier on, state your results. Okay, so maintaining interest is important. So you want to give out the most important information of your presentation at the beginning and also at the end of your talk. Okay, of course, you want to use visuals to illustrate your points with images, diagrams. Okay, so this is all part of providing some visual formats, usually in the form of slides, okay, PowerPoint slides. You could also, to keep it interesting, you could also conclude your talk with some memorable last words. Now, if you're the quirky type, if you can come up with interesting punchlines or interesting, a quirky quote, you may use this to your advantage. But if you're not very quirky, you're quite dry like me, then this might not be very helpful. Okay, so these are just some tips, some pointers on how you can keep your talk interesting and maintain your audience attention throughout your talk right to the end. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, first impressions are very important. Okay, so you want to give them, you want to give your audience a reason to listen to you. Okay, so there are many different ways to draw in your audience. So you can start with something, something general or something less, maybe just something a little bit less academic. So you can start with a story or a commentary on a current development, okay, about something that raises an important question, issue, or problem. You can frame your talk with a brief context background about your particular topic, and then move quickly into a brief explanation about the issue or the problem or the argument that that you want to address. Okay, so in short, okay, start with the big picture. I mean, this is a very standard guideline. This is the standard structure of any academic presentation or even academic writing. Okay, to begin with the big picture and then narrow your focus down. And once you've done that, okay, to keep your audience interested, okay, you should at least let them know why they should keep listening to you, okay, why they should care about your talk, why they should be interested, and then let them know what's coming next. Okay, so I've already mentioned my important my key message, okay, and this is why you should keep listening to me, because this is what's coming next. I'm going to explain why I'm arguing my point. Okay, so then at the end of the presentation, okay, you want to leave them with these thoughts. So a successful presentation means that the audience understood what your presentation is about and what your important message is. Okay, so you should leave them with these thoughts. Okay, I understand what the problem was, why it was important, why is this person presenting what they're presenting. Okay, I have an idea about, okay, what their solution is to a problem, how is it different or better than what others have presented, what others have written about. Okay, and you may also want them to think, oh, okay, so this presenter knows the literature. Maybe they've quoted my work. Okay, if you're within the same area, the same discipline, and you could even, you know, sort of plant those thoughts about future collaborations or possible collaborations. Okay, that's always very interesting. That's a very interesting aspect of a conference. Okay, and you should also leave them with a feeling that, okay, that's such an interesting study. I want to read that paper when it's published. Okay, so in a nutshell, a good or a successful presentation leaves the audience having your takeaway message. Okay, so this takeaway message is basically your main point. Okay, why you are presenting, why you're giving that presentation, what your main point is. Okay, what your study is basically all about. Okay, so in order to sort of give off the impression that, you know, you are credible, you are an academic, and why other academics or students should listen to you, okay, you need to give the impression that you are familiar with with your work, with other people's work in the related field. Okay, so you should be familiar with, you can't be familiar with all, but at least some of the related work. But again, you don't have to list down each and every paper that you've read. Okay, sometimes you don't even have to cite all the sources in your presentation. You can do that in your written work, okay, in your published paper. So because you don't have to present every single paper that you have read, or you don't have to list down or cite everything that you've read, you should just talk about results that are immediately related to your work. Okay, you can have references at the end of your presentation, so just listing down references, or you can even just orally present, orally refer to your sources in your talk, okay, or you can even have it somewhere in your slides, okay, just briefly just state the source, okay. Okay, so one of the aspects of a presentation that makes it interesting is providing visuals. Okay, so providing visuals in the form of slides. Okay, PowerPoint slides. Of course, visuals make it more interesting. It also keeps the audience attention. It's one way to maintain your audience attention, not just looking at you and listening to you, but having something in the background, okay, something visual in the background to look at, to break up their attention. So when preparing slides, okay, you have to think about designing your slides effectively. Okay, so the best thing to remember is less is more. Okay, so when you have slides, try not to fill it with too many texts, too many words. Okay, you don't want to fill up your slides with a lot of texts, with paragraphs, chunks of texts, even full sentences throughout your slides. Okay, you should fill your talk with verbal, your verbal speech. Okay, so the audience should be listening to you rather than reading your slides throughout. Okay. Of course, when designing your slides, it's very tempting to, if you look at all the templates and everything, you know, all the colorful templates and background, it's very tempting to want to use all these very attractive designs. And also PowerPoint has all these features, such as this animation feature, which okay, makes it more interesting, but they can actually be very distracting if you use too much animation. Okay, so use it sparingly, use it if only if necessary. Of course, you want to, sometimes you want to make your presentation more interesting. Okay, provide visuals, you include some images here and there. Okay, this isn't a problem, but you have to be careful again. There is a danger of putting too many images on your slides. And again, that can be very distracting. You can have colorful slides, but again, you have to be very careful with this because it can be very distracting. So you can use color to emphasize some points in your slides. Okay, so your slides should be consistent throughout. Okay, if you use a particular template, if you use a background, if you use color, okay, your choices of color for your text, font type, font size, make sure they are consistent throughout. Okay, you don't want to have one slide that has a pink background and then another slide that has a green background. It's just not consistent. Okay, again, it can be very distracting. So use slides appropriately. Okay, try and avoid this this saying "death by PowerPoint." I don't know if you've heard of this term before, but it refers to the use of the excessive use of PowerPoint features, animation, background themes, color, and so on. Okay. Images and so on. So having too much, using too much of these exciting, creative PowerPoint features can actually cause, it's very distracting that at the end of it, at the end of your presentation, the audience just get lost. Okay, the content of your presentation just gets lost in all these interesting, these exciting features. Okay, so let's have a look at some examples of slide layout and slides design. Okay, so I would always prefer to use something that is very simple. Okay, and of course, you don't want to overcrowd your slides. Okay, not with images, not with color, and more importantly with text. Okay, so you don't want to have chunks of text in your slides. Okay, so again, you don't want your audience to keep reading your slides. You want them to listen to you. So having minimal text in your slides is more effective. Okay, so having paragraphs, even full sentences in slides can be very distracting. Okay, so the best way to do this is to show one point at a time. Okay, so have bullet points. Okay, so you may want to show one point at a time. Okay, this is my first point. Okay, and then next, this is my second point, and then I will be talking about this point. Okay, I will be explaining, and then finally, this is my next point. Okay, so you can use the in this case, you can use the animation features. Okay, to show your point at different intervals. Okay, so again, you can use animations, but use them sparingly and effectively. Okay, so when you have text, your font should be, again, an effective way to use fonts is to have maybe just different sizes for different types of points. Okay, so your secondary point may be the main part of your the main text in your slides. It could be it has the smallest size. Okay, when you want to emphasize the main point, you can make that a little bit bigger, and then of course the title. Usually at the top, sometimes even at the side, okay, of your slide, has to be bigger, okay, to emphasize that this is the title of the slide. And also, when choosing the types of fonts to use, again, you know, sometimes you can you can look at all these different types of fonts. Ooh, that looks very interesting. That looks really creative. That looks very pretty. And you know, it you can just not think about how effective they might be on a slide. Okay, so try not to look at all these different fonts and how interesting they look. Okay, because they can be distracting. Sometimes they can even be difficult to read on a slide. Okay, so choose the sans serif fonts that are easy to read on a slide. Okay, such as these examples that I've given here. Even Times New Roman may be a bit difficult to read on screen. Okay, so try not to use it on the slides. I mean, they might be easier to read on paper, but on the screen, if you stare too much at the computer screen, it might even strain your eyes. Okay, so font size, again, very important. Okay, if you use too small a font, it may be very difficult for your audience to see. Okay, and do not use big fonts, or do not capitalize every single letter in your slide, because it is very difficult to read. Okay, do not use fancy, gimmicky, or complicated fonts such as that, because it can be distracting and it can be very difficult to read. Okay, so color scheme is also very important. Okay, that can also determine, they can make and break your presentation. Okay, or your slides. To present your text effectively, of course, color is important. Okay, if you have text, make sure that the color of your text has a very sharp contrast with the color of your background. Okay, so I always prefer to use a plain background. I prefer to use white. So you can have black text on pale background, dark color on a white background. Okay, dark color for your text. Now, if you think white is boring, okay, of course you can make it a bit more interesting. You can use brighter colors, okay, or darker colors. So if you use darker colors, the color of your text should be in sharp contrast with that. Okay, so use a light color or white for your text, or a pale color that contrasts with the dark color of your background. Okay, so you can use different colors for your text to reinforce the logic of your structure. So for example, if you want to show something that progressed from one point to another, you can start off with a light color and then move on to a dark color. Okay, so again, use this sparingly and effectively. Okay, don't use this throughout your entire presentation. You can also use a different color to emphasize a point, okay, just to highlight that this is the main point. This is this is the point that I want to highlight, to emphasize. So you can use different colors effectively on your slides to illustrate that. Okay, so bad color choices can affect your presentation and your slides. Okay, so using a font color that doesn't contrast very well with your background is difficult to read. Okay, so if you have a pale or a light colored background, okay, use a dark colored font. Don't use a light colored font. Okay, so try also to not use color just for decoration, just to make it more pretty or attractive, because they can be very distractive and even annoying for your audience. Okay, you can use a different color for each point. Okay, but again, use this sparingly. Don't use this throughout. And that last example there, trying to be creative, okay, having a variety of colors for different letters, maybe creating a rainbow effect. It's interesting, attractive, but it's not effective. Okay, so sometimes creativity can be your enemy. Okay, it can be a foe rather than a friend. So keep it simple. Always just keep it simple. So use backgrounds that are simple, okay? Use the same background consistently throughout your presentation, okay? So be consistent throughout. Now, I always prefer plain backgrounds, okay? But some people think, some of you may think that that's boring. So you can have some sort of texture in your background as well, okay? If you want to be a bit more exciting or a bit more interesting or creative. So you can have like, for example, this sort of texture, okay? Some can work, okay, as long as it's not too busy, okay? So again, when you have accompanying text, make sure that the color or even the texture of the text has a very sharp contrast to that background, okay? Try not to use a background that has a very busy or complicated texture. You may also want to use a more interesting color scheme, maybe using gradient, okay? So this progression from a dark to a lighter color and vice versa, that's okay, okay, as long as the accompanying text is in sharp contrast to the background, okay? So this is an acceptable use of a gradient for a background, okay? This one is quite difficult to view, okay? Quite difficult to read. So again, be very careful with your color choices. Okay, now some people like to use background images, images as your background. While that can be more, maybe more interesting, maybe more creative, they can actually be very distracting, okay? If you want to use images as a background, okay, but make sure that when you have accompanying text, it stands out, okay? The contrast is sharp from the background, and try not to use an image that is too busy, okay? Just, I always prefer to keep it simple, okay? I always prefer to use a plain background, but if you want to zhuzh it up a bit, it's fine, but just be very careful to make it not be too distracting. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, animations can be a friend, it can be a foe as well if it's overused. Okay, so use it only when it's absolutely necessary. So I also like to use animation to move from one point to another. Okay, but I like to stick with the just a simple type of animation, okay? This appear is the most effective type of animation to use when you want to move from one point to another, okay? Because it doesn't take up too much time, okay? It's not fancy or gimmicky, it goes straight to the point. If you find appear too boring, okay, you may use others that can be effective and are not too distracting, okay? Such as wipe, fade, and even the random bars. Okay, so as you can see, the points appear very quickly. It doesn't take up too much time. Okay, so try and avoid animations that are distracting or that are too gimmicky, too fancy, and they even take up at least 2 seconds for your points to appear. Okay, such as the wheel, even this one. Okay, bounce, swivel, shape. Okay, see, that can be very distracting and it takes up too much time, and the audience have to wait for the points to appear, and the information might be lost along the way. Okay, so keep it simple. Okay, so when you're presenting, if you have data to present, okay, for your study. So if you have, for example, numerical data, statistical data, and so on, it is always very effective to present them in a visual format, okay? So just like how you would present it in a paper. So visuals can help make your points stand out, okay? They can make them much stronger. But also, again, be very careful with the type of graph or chart you want to use to present different types of data. Okay, so just very briefly, you can use a line chart to present trends or evolution in time. So something with a timeline, patterns or trends. Okay, you can use a pie chart to present percentages or parts of a whole. And you can use a bar or a column chart to present different patterns, different ranks with different variables. Okay, so when choosing the types of charts or graphs to use in your presentation, keep it simple. Okay, actually, the most simple type of visual format can be the most effective. Okay, so this is just an example of a good type of graph to use. Okay, so as you can see, the information presented there is very simple. The use of color is minimal yet striking. Okay, so you can see the different trends, the different data, different types of data, different data sets. Using different colors, okay? They're more easier to visualize in graph form, okay, using different colors. And again, you have to label your graph effectively, okay? It has to have a title, and then you have to have all these accompanying information so that it's easier for your audience to look at, okay? So this is an example of a bad type of graph, okay? As you can see, you know, those minor grids are very distracting, okay? It's not very pleasing to the eyes. The font is too small, okay? Colors are illogical, okay? Title is missing, and shading can be very distracting, okay? So use colors that are solid or block colors, okay? Don't need to use any shading or any distracting gimmicky or any creative features for colors. Okay, so when preparing the presentation, of course, you're preparing your slides in advance, okay? So I always keep going through my slides for before any presentation. Sometimes, you know, you prepare your slides, and then when you go back to them, you think, I can improve this. You know, this information is unnecessary. This slide is unnecessary. Maybe I should include more slides about this. Okay, so go through them over and over again. If you're using animations, okay, make sure that they're being used effectively. Okay, practice goes a long way. And I think I need to stress this this aspect of a conference presentation or any academic presentation: timing. Okay, so timing is very important. You need to keep with the time that you are given. Okay, so I'll talk about timing again a little later on. So when you're preparing your slides, okay, to prepare them effectively, you need to have a plan. Okay, so this is just a suggested outline for your slides. Okay, so bear in mind that usually in a conference presentation is quite short. 15 minutes the shortest. Sometimes you have 20 minutes, sometimes you have 30 minutes, okay? And usually you are given 5 or 10 minutes at the end for questions and answers. So usually your entire presentation could be up to 15 to 20 minutes or even 25 minutes. Okay, so that's not very long, that's quite short. So again, you don't want to have too many slides. Okay, so keep the number of slides to the minimum as much as you can. So this is just a suggestion of how you can plan your slides. Okay, so at the beginning, of course, you have to have a title slide. Okay, you need to present the title of your presentation, okay, your name, affiliation, perhaps even your contact information, okay? And you may want to have an outline of your presentation, okay? You may want to have a slide showing the outline. So I will start with an introduction and then with some background, methodology, and then results and so on, okay? So you can include this, but it's again, optional. Some people don't like to have it, okay? Sometimes you can just talk about it. You can just present it verbally rather than visually, okay? You may want to have your introduction in 1 or 2 slides, okay? Depending on how much information you want to show, okay? So you can have you may want to state your main objective or the purpose of your presentation, or your argument, okay, the key message about your topic. You may want to have it on your slide, okay? So if you're giving an applied type of presentation, you may want to describe the data and scientific objectives just very briefly in your introduction. If you're giving a theoretical type of presentation, describe the problem and some limitations of the current approaches, okay, and which is why your talk will approach some effective ways of dealing with the problem, okay? And then you may want to follow that with some background information. So in the sense, a review of the literature about your topic, okay? So a review of what other people have done, what other people have said, okay? So you may have that in 1 or 2 slides, again, depending on how much information you want to give out. And then you have you must have a method section, okay, especially if you're presenting an empirical study, okay? So you may want to have 1 or 2 slides, okay? Some academics prefer to have more slides on this, maybe 3 or 4, because the methodology section is very important, okay? And then you may want to have more slides for your findings, okay? Maybe 3 or 4 slides presenting key findings, okay, or an analysis of your data. So of course, in this part of your presentation, you can present visual, your data in a visual format. So graphs, charts, and tables, and so on, okay? So maybe you can have more slides for this section. But the most important thing to remember is do not present everything, okay? So you don't have to present every single finding, okay? Just pick the most relevant or the most interesting finding for your presentation, okay? So if you're presenting a paper presentation, okay, something, the study that you have already written, maybe in the written form in the paper, you have presented more findings or results, but you don't have time for this for your presentation, okay? So remember, your time is limited, so only present key areas, only very important points, okay? If your audience is interested in looking at the bigger picture, you may invite them to read your paper, okay? And then you can have a conclusion or a discussion section, okay? Maybe 1 or 2 slides. So just a suggestion, you may have 1 slide to summarize your main points, okay? And another slide to lead your audience to your most important point or your takeaway message, okay? You can have another slide on future work, okay? This is optional, so you can give them some areas for future research. Okay, that may be people in the audience who are within the same discipline as you. Maybe they can look at other research opportunities. Okay, but you can also present this verbally. Okay, you may also have one slide for your references or resources. Okay, total 10 to 15 slides, again, depending on the time. Okay, so the most important thing to remember is keep it to a minimum. Okay, you don't want to have too many slides because you don't want to spend too much time looking through your slides. You don't want your audience to spend too much time just looking at your slides. You want them to listen to you, and you want to keep with the time limit. Okay, so let's now move on to the delivery of your talk. Okay, most important thing is to be enthusiastic. Okay, to be positive, have a positive attitude. If you start off with a negative attitude, why should your audience be interested in you? Okay, so the audience feeds on the presenter's mood or attitude. Okay, so one of the benefits of an oral presentation, okay, rather than a poster presentation, which can also occur with conference presentations, is that you are able to engage with the audience. Okay, that makes it even more interesting and more interactive. Okay, so you, in a sense, you are speaking with them. Okay, so this of course comes in two forms: the spoken form, and then there's the nonverbal type of communication, such as gestures, facial gestures, movement, eye contact, facial expressions. Okay, so try to be dynamic, try to look interesting. Okay, and always be positive. Your voice also plays a key role. Okay, the tone, the pace, the loudness. Okay, so try not to speak too fast, try not to speak too slow. Okay, try not to speak too low. Okay, your audience should be able to listen to you. When we're presenting on virtually like this, then I think that depends on the technical, that relies heavily on the technical equipment. But if you're presenting physically in a room, then you really need to think about, you need to really consider these aspects. Try not to read directly from your notes or from your PowerPoint slides. Okay, so you should have a very clear idea of your talk. You should be engaging with your audience rather than reading from your slides. Okay, and also very important, most importantly, finish in time. Okay, now usually the final part of the presentation is question. Okay, so sometimes this sometimes doesn't even happen at the end of your presentation. Sometimes, you have, if you're unfortunate enough to have a member of the audience interrupting you in the middle of your talk. Okay, so that happens sometimes. Okay, they of course, people ask questions of in a different of a different nature. Okay, sometimes they ask questions for clarification. Okay, sometimes they ask you to suggest something helpful. Okay, sometimes they just want to talk to you. They just want to engage or interact with you. Sometimes they can even, some questions can even come off as a little bit condescending. Okay, to show that that person has more knowledge about the topic than you. Okay, so when you encounter this type of situation, you need to be able to handle those questions well. Okay, so if you have a member of the audience interrupting you in the middle of your talk, okay, just tell them, okay, we will get to that at the end of the session, okay? Now, if you cannot answer a question, which is, I think this is one of the most common worries about giving an oral presentation, yeah, something that is impromptu, something that is more spontaneous. Okay, sometimes you may find yourself not being able to answer a question. So when this happens, don't panic, okay, or don't show them that you know, you're caught off guard, or that you are unable to, that you're nervous because you're unable to answer the question. So there are different ways to deal with this. Okay, so first of all, you can compliment the question. Oh, that is a very good question. Okay, and you can even ask suggestions from the audience. Okay, turn the question to the audience and said, perhaps we have someone, a member of the audience who can answer that question. Okay, and you may also suggest some resources that would help address the question. Okay, sometimes you may want to be prepared as well with the type of questions that can be asked. So I've looked at this this article. It is about by Trafford and Lesham. Okay, so they provided a list of predictable questions. Most notably, these questions are for postgraduate students or PhD students during their viva, but this can also be applied for conferences. Okay, so these are just some generic questions that sometimes a member of the audience may feel inclined to ask any presenter. Okay, so why did you choose this topic? How did you arrive at this framework? Okay, how did you arrive at your research design? Why did you choose this methodology? Okay, how did you select your sample, your materials? How did you arrive at your conclusions? Okay, so these are just some generic questions that you can expect. Okay, so if you're the nervous type, you may want to be prepared before your presentation. Okay. Okay, so how can you get better at presenting? Of course, practicing. Okay, practicing really helps. Okay, if you practice your presentation, you're able to also to pick out some areas that may need improvement or even timing. Okay, you can see if you've stuck with the time limit given. Okay, some interesting tips here as well. If you are not the first presenter, okay, you can observe others. Okay, so you can sit through other people's presentations. You can get some pointers. Okay, steal some good presentation ideas. You can observe and pick out some presentation behavior and so on that you think that's not very good. Okay, I will avoid doing that for my presentation. Okay, and you can even also seek some comments from your peers. Okay, I think I might be running a little bit short of time. So
it's okay. It's okay, Dr. Ish. You have another 5 minutes. Yeah.
So I won't go too much into the language and the style of presenting. Okay, so just very briefly, of course, you need to establish some cohesion in your talk. Okay, so using signposting language, if you haven't, you can always Google it. There's so many different examples of signposts. Okay, it basically means giving signals to the audience about what you're saying. So you can use signposting language very effectively for a variety of functions. Okay, so you can use them for introducing your topic, perhaps listing your points, okay, transitioning from one point to another, or transitioning from one section to another, changing the topic, okay, referring to visuals, referring to your charts or tables and graphs. Okay, you may even want to check your audience, check with your audience that they're still with you. Okay, to rephrase or clarify something. Okay, dealing with a question and also ending the presentation effectively. Okay, so with the different modes of presentations, some of you may present in a group, okay, or with a partner. So the most important thing to remember here is that it has to be cohesive, okay? So you have different people presenting maybe different parts, but it's still one presentation, okay? So it still has to look like a cohesive presentation. So this is actually quite, it's a bit more difficult than it seems, okay? Because you may have different members speaking, taking turns, okay? Presenting different parts or different sections of the presentation, okay? But I always feel that when you're presenting in a group, the presentation should be equally divided among speakers. Okay, so this requires a lot of planning as well. Okay, so at least have maybe 2 or 3 or 5 minutes for each speaker, depending on the time limit given. Okay, and then it should be as a cohesive whole. It should be presented as a group work. Okay, but again, remember that it is still one presentation. Okay, and finally, looking at the type of presentation that is relevant to our current situation, which is a virtual type of presentation. Okay, so this is even the type of presentation that I am conducting right now: online presentations and video presentations. Okay, so they're similar and different in many ways. They're both virtual, okay, but and they both rely heavily on technology and technological equipment. Okay, so they can be effective. Again, it depends on the presenter and of course technology. With online presentations, you're not really interacting with the audience. I mean, I'm presenting right now and I can't even see my audience, which is very, very strange. And it's not a very good way to to interact, you know, to make it more interactive. So I'm just basically talking to a camera, so it's very strange. But we are now forced into this mode of presenting, so we will have to make do and just use this mode effectively. So with online presentations, there is no physical interaction with the audience. Of course, gestures. You have to still use gestures because your audience can see you because you're speaking on camera. Okay, you have to use your voice effectively. Okay, pace, even just speaking in a moderate pace rather than quickly or slowly. And visuals, again, very effective, okay, like having the slides here. And you still have to keep within the time, like I'm trying to do right now, okay? And just one last point here. With the video presentations, again, it's very reliant on technology, but you have more time to prepare, more time to plan, and to edit the presentation. Okay, so a lot of conferences that I'm aware of, they now prefer to use to utilize video presentation. Okay, so it requires the presenter to record themselves presenting with their slides, and during the conference they will play the video during the presentation. Now, in that sense, you can avoid any technical issues during the day of the conference, which is to the advantage. Okay, but again, you're not really interacting with your audience, which is what a presentation is about. I think for the LEC, I think the presenters have a choice. Yeah, you have a choice to present online or to submit a video presentation. So I guess whichever way suits you better. But of course, there are always more ways to make them more effective. Okay, so I'll wrap up. I'll come to the end of my presentation, at the end of my talk. So some important things to remember: a good presentation successfully conveys your message to the audience. Okay, the takeaway message, as I mentioned earlier. Keeping your audience engaged, which is very difficult for a virtual type of presentation. Keeping with the timing, again, as I have illustrated, currently it's quite difficult. Okay, and having your audience know what your presentation is about at the end of it. Okay. That's it. This is a list of some of the resources that I've used for my talk. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ish, for the very detailed and very useful session. The tips that you shared with us are really, really valuable, especially if any of us who is planning to do a conference presentation very soon, or even for future use. I think it comes in really handy. Just too bad that we have got only 1 hour for you. Otherwise, you could have shared a little bit more. But I think, in terms of timing, you've done it really, really well. As in my case, I've always had problem controlling the timing when I do my conference presentation. So anyway, we are going to this question and answer sessions, and I have got 2 questions that have been recorded on the chat box. But if let's say any of you would like to ask the question on the spot, orally, please do unmute yourself one by one and ask Dr. Ish, if you have any question. But let me just go to the one that has been typed out on the chat box first. Okay, one is by Puan Siti Aslina. She asks whether it is better to use PowerPoint presentation or infographic when we do presentations. So, Dr. Ish, what's your take on this?
Yes, this is why PowerPoint presentations are effective. Because it's a visual format, and using visual formats keeps the audience interested. Mm-hmm. And if you have infographics, this is the best way to do it. And I think it's sort of using PowerPoint or having slides for a presentation is sort of synonymous now. I think it's a normal feature. I mean, I'm not quite sure how conference presentations were given before the era of PowerPoint. I guess OHP. But the concept of having slides has been there for quite a long time, maybe since the 80s. So it's always very effective to have some visuals in the background. I mean, with when you're presenting physically, I really miss doing that. Presenting in a room full of people and having just the screen behind you. It's much less reliant on PowerPoint slides. I mean, you can have it, you may not have it, and think with virtual presentation, it's sort of a necessity now, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, of course, you can always PowerPoint slides are very, very effective, but again, you need to be very careful with the features of the features of PowerPoint that you're using, colors, background, animations, and so on. You don't want it to be distracting. Okay, it just has to be straightforward, especially with infographics.
Yeah. So I hope this answers your question, Puan Siti Aslina. And the next question is from Puan Sharina. I think it's something that you mentioned before this about the live recording and also the video presentation. She actually asked which mode would you prefer and why for conference presentation?
I think thank you, Sharina. I think there are some pros and cons to each of them. With the online presentation, it's in real time. It's live. It's more. There is some sort of there is interaction with your audience, some sort of interaction, even if you can't see them. At least your audience, you assume that your audience can see you, okay, and you can interact in real time. So it is in a way similar to a physical presentation, yes, because you are presenting in real time. Whereas with a video presentation, the advantages are that it's you have more time to prepare. You can fine tune it. You can edit it. Okay, you can cut out bits here and there that you think are not good. Okay, you can make it very, very good because you have time to prepare and record it. However, there is no interaction with the audience at all. Okay. But it minimizes any technical disruptions that may occur during the virtual presentation, which is a disadvantage for an online presentation. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. H. We have a couple more questions that popped up on the chat box, but I don't think we have time to manage all of them. Okay, I'm just going to pick like one or two of them. One is from Puan Farah American. She asked about the use of space, white space, which she said is negative space in slide presentation. That could actually work against the effect of being attractive, to make the presentation more attractive and interesting. So is there any guidelines or rules in the use of such white space or negative space in the slides presentations for conference academic presentation? Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. There is no rule whatsoever. I mean, even with how to give an effective presentation, how to use slides effectively, there is no concrete rule to any of that. Okay, this is just some guidelines, some tips. I think you are right that some people may find this boring. Okay, unattractive, boring. So I am aware of this. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes it may be boring. Simple may be boring. Yes. So you can always, if you find it boring or unattractive, you can always make it more attractive. You can make it more. You can be a bit more creative. Of course, you don't have to use too much spacing, but you can use colors, themes. You can be more creative, but you just have to bear in mind that keep it to a minimum. Yeah. So a slide can be creative, can be more colorful or attractive, and yet be effective. Okay. So just don't use too much, don't include too much features. Don't use too many different colors. Just make it consistent. Keep the effective, simple aspect of it. Okay, so there is no one rule. I mean, sometimes it can be subjective, you know. I mean, I think that simple, plain slide is attractive to me. Okay, and then some people may find it boring. So you can't please everybody. That's my answer. You can't please everybody. But just to keep it at a minimum. Of course, you can make it more attractive. Yeah, make it colorful, make it more interesting, but just keep it to a minimum.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ish. I hope that answers your question, Puan Farah. And the last question on the chat box, I think this from Nadira, and she's concerned about what to put in her findings section of the conference because she hasn't got the findings yet. I think at the moment she's still working on chapters 1 to 3, so she's asking, what to include in the findings section at the conference should she need to present a paper at the conference.
Okay, thank you, Nadira. Yeah, so this is not uncommon as well. Okay, some people present a working paper. Okay, so in this case, you don't have any findings yet. So of course, there is no concrete rule or structure to a presentation. Okay, obviously this is a different type of presentation. You can have a full paper, and then you can have a work in progress, which I assume is Nadira, your type of presentation. So in this case, perhaps you can just present the background of your study, okay, the objective of your study, some information about your study, some literature about your area, and more importantly, the methodology. Okay, so the methodology is very important. I assume that you have this. You have a layout of the methodology of your study, so you can focus on that. Okay. With regard to findings, you don't have to have a findings section, but you can have, perhaps, if you have some preliminary findings, okay, you can present that. Or if you have some, maybe just very briefly talk about what you expect from your findings. Okay, so if you have a hypothesis, what do you expect to find from your findings, from the data that you will be collecting or are collecting for your study? Okay, because the goal for this type of presentation, again, is to get feedback. Okay, so you don't have to present a full study, but if you have a partial study or a work in progress, you can still present it, and you can turn that into a sort of sharing type of session. Okay, gaining feedback or advice from your peers or other academics. Okay, so I hope that is helpful. That's helpful advice for you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ish. I think we can only afford this much of time for question and answer. Yeah, I think Dr. Ish is also quite tired of talking for a full 1 hour without any break in between.
Yes.
I feel it. Yeah. So, well, I think we have learned much from this session, and we still have more to learn in the upcoming webinar organized by i-InteLeC. That is, let me just read out the title. It is, I wrote it down on the chat box. It is a webinar by Associate Professor Dr. Noor Fariza Muhammad Noor, who is also an editor of Gemma Online, which is a very reputable journal from Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia. This webinar is on publication in high-impact journals, happening on the 9th November 2021. So if you are interested to know more about publishing in index journals, please do sign up for this webinar. You can always visit the i-InteLeC website and check out the dates and also the requirements and the fees, and join us again. So yeah, we have come to the end of this session. And please do not leave yet, because we need to stay on to take a group photo for documentation and also for memory purposes.
Before we go, I would just like to have just a final message.
Sure.
Thank you everybody for attending this talk and for listening to me speak for an hour. I do hope that I have at least given some useful advice. And to those who are presenting for the LEC, I wish you all the best, and I look forward to attending your presentation if I can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We definitely look forward to meeting more people from Universiti Brunei Darussalam. We know some of us we didn't go there in the last academic exchange session. So well, meeting virtually isn't that bad, actually. Yeah, at least you get to meet more people, and from all over the world even. Yeah, so that is really great. So I think Mas Ida, are you ready? We are going to pose for a group photo. So everyone, please turn on your camera. But before this, could you do not forget to sign in your attendance at the link given here, right? It doesn't matter whether you're from UiTM Kedah or not. You just sign in. It's fine, all right? For record purposes. And well, let's turn on our camera and put on our nice smile and look at the camera and pretending that we're posing in a group photo.
Okay.
All right, Mas, are you ready? Please give us a cue, Mas. Oh, this is one problem with virtual presentation. It's like you're forever talking and feel like you're talking in a vacuum.
Yes.
Okay, ready, everyone?
Yes, Mas. Okay, ready. Okay.
1, 2, 3. All right, one more time. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mas.
So,
yeah, again, on behalf of the organizers of this webinar, I'd like to thank all of you for taking your time to attend this session. And I hope you have taken back with you some really good memories and also very useful knowledge. All right, so thank you very much. Hope to see you again online or in person. And please stay safe. Yeah, please stay safe. And yeah, all the best. Bye.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.